Item 20 on our agenda today is on the census. We're going to have a briefing on the census with Ms. Chin starting us off. Welcome, Ms. Vu. Great to see you as well. We've had a long and unusual day, so Ms. Chen, hopefully we can wrap all this up before the next census.
That is the goal. Hello, everyone. This is Carolyn Chen, Legislative Analyst. I have the pleasure of introducing the census briefing today, which we have cut down so quick because we knew this would be a busy day. I do just want to note that that the Community Engagement Cluster, as well as the Office of Community Partnerships, while this is a census briefing, it really was only a piece of the work that they were doing throughout the entire census period. It was census plus COVID information, plus multicultural communications, plus elections. So even though we're just going to focus on census today, the whole update of during this time period and the resources and the hard work into this group is not really fully realized. So although you're only 15 minutes, right? We said 15 minutes. So I do want to just thank the team for all their work last couple of months. Take it away, Diane.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. And as many of you know, I'm really good with time. So we're going to stick to 15 minutes. We appeared in front of the council back in February to talk about our campaign. So I'm not going to talk through all of the details. And you also have my report that's also on record. I'm going to try to just give a very broad overview of our outreach strategies as we moved through COVID, highlight key opportunity tracks, and note some important dates to keep in mind as we move forward. So I'm quite proud of what's been accomplished by everyone that was involved in this campaign, particularly our communities, for standing up and making sure that they were counted. This truly was the definition of teamwork makes the dream work. So going into the 2020 census, we knew that there were three things that were going to be different this time around, and there were two challenges that drove our strategies and messaging. First, this was the first census that was primarily done online, which impacted us in two ways. First, the digital divide, particularly amongst seniors, and our messaging to our seniors was to encourage them to complete their census via the phone. Secondly, the outreach of the Census Bureau was scaled back significantly because they were doing a lot of virtual and online work. So jurisdictions really needed to step up to the plate. The state of Maryland issued a 2020 Census Grant Program, and we applied for and received the largest grant in the state. And so we greatly appreciate the state's support. Secondly, the political climate that we're living in that caused the lack of trust from historically undercounted communities, particularly communities of color, immigrant communities, and LGBTQ communities. And that required much more outreach and education on the front and back end. And lastly, for the first time ever, people could self-identify specific countries of origin as it relates to race. This greatly impacts our communities, and we spent a lot of time educating our communities on the importance of this, particularly to the Black, Asian, Middle Eastern communities who have been really asking for disaggregation of data for a long time. And also, people could identify as multiracial for the first time ever. So you've seen the numbers. Montgomery County finished with a self-response rate of 78%. This is 1.9 percentage points above what our self-response rate was in 2010. And since we are the most populous jurisdiction in the state, we were key to the state finishing at 9th in the nation. It's also important to note that the response rates nationally and locally had decreased over the past two census. And so now we're starting our upward trend. There were several strategies that were key to this response that I want to highlight here today. We took an all hands on deck approach. When we launched our Complete Count Committee back in February of 2019, ahead of most jurisdictions in the region, with then Council President and our CCC Chair, Nancy Navarro, we ended up with 142 members in our CCCs. The average size in other jurisdictions is between 15 and 25 members. And this was important for us to do because we really wanted as many people as possible to carry forth the message of the importance of the census. Secondly, we took a regional approach and we broke out the larger CCC into 5 regional subcommittees that were chaired by the regional service center directors. And we did this in order to take a very granular approach to target specific communities and also census tracts. Sean Ellis, our census manager, is going to talk more about this in a little bit. Thirdly, we relied heavily on our partners on the ground. We worked through our nonprofits, our civic associations, our jurisdictions, small businesses, et cetera, to both guide our overall strategy and help us for the on the ground in-person outreach. Fourth, we used marketing to specifically target communities based on the top 6 spoken languages in the county outside of English. COVID presented a lot of challenges, but it also presented us with a very unique opportunity to do everything that we could to get into people's households. And so we issued multilingual flyers. We issued mailers, door hangers in other languages. We had 1,500 multilingual lawn signs across the county in specific census tracts. We also utilized newspaper ads, radio ads, and TV ads. You saw us on the side of the ride-on buses and rideshare. We were in WMATA, and this came about through a COG partnership. We ramped up our social media outreach. So for example, we used WhatsApp to target Spanish speakers. We used Facebook posts, and this was particularly useful for the Amharic speaking community. We used targeted text messaging. So we hit 66,000 households in 4 waves across the 25 lowest response tracts in the county. And in the last wave, right before the deadline, we hit 183 households across, 183,000 households in the last wave across 10 targeted census tracts. And we also worked with our nonprofit partners to do phone banking as well. The last thing, which is probably the most visible, was our in-person outreach. So we launched our outreach campaign in September of 2019 at the Word of Montgomery Festival. We took a hiatus due to COVID, and then we picked back up during census weekend, which was August 7th through the 10th, right after the announcement of one of the deadlines, and right when the Census Bureau picked back up with their field operations. We held over 350 events, and our in-person volunteers were key. I mean, they truly are the rock stars to our outreach campaigns. We had 376 volunteer census ambassadors in lime green shirts all over the county, and many of them were multilingual. They were passing out, census bags and swag. And we were really focused on the details here because we wanted people to recognize our friendly census ambassadors and understand that when they saw a census ambassador, they could complete their census on the spot. Which brings me to the technology piece, also key to our outreach. We had tablets and laptops that were available for people to complete their census on the spot. And we also created QR codes on posters to adhere to social distancing guidelines, so people could scan the QR code from their own mobile device and complete the census on the spot. I mean, at some of these events, we had over 100 households complete their census on the spot. And I mean, that's incredible because that equates to $5 million over the course of 10 years that comes back to the county for schools, roads, social services, and more. As Carolyn mentioned, we recognized early on during our outreach that there was a significant overlap between communities that were most directly impacted by COVID and our targeted census communities. So we tied COVID resources and information to our census outreach. We provided information on food, testing, rental assistance. And as we approach election time, we worked very closely with the Board of Elections to also tie in voting information. And our BOE partner, shout out to Dr. Z, created a texting option for folks to complete the census as well. So that's the aerial view of our strategies. And now I want to turn it over to our census manager, who was really the person who executed all of this and was able to juggle 500 balls in the air at the same time. Sean Ellis, as you know, we call him Mr. Census, and he's going to talk about our targeted approach, and we'll highlight 6 key opportunity tracks.
Okay, thank you, Diane. So she's given you a really good overview of response rates, our strategy, and what we look to accomplish over the last not just 6 months, but the last 12 months. So my goal here is to highlight a few census tracts where we dedicated a lot of man hours and a lot of attention to over the last 6 months, and give you some insight into our approach, kind of from a granular level. I guess the best way to start this is to give some context to how we approach this. So there are two things that we looked at when determining which census tracts we really needed to focus on. The first thing was those census tracts that had been undercounted or had low response rate in previous decennials. Then the second factor that we used, our criteria, was those historically undercounted populations at disproportionate levels. And you've heard them described in different conversations as hard to count or historically undercounted. And that includes our LGBTQ community. It includes children under 5. It includes people of color, renters, and most importantly, our immigrant community. So those are the two factors that went into how we identified these census tracts and focused our attention. The other thing that you're going to hear me talk about really quickly is non-response follow-up. And all that is that's the phase in the Census Bureau's campaign where they go and visit households who have not yet responded to the census. Why are we talking about that? Essentially, we were fortunate, and I say fortunate, I use that term lightly or loosely, in that for the Census Bureau, their non-response follow-up phase began on August 11th here in Montgomery County. A little earlier in rural regions across the state, and even in the District of Columbia, they started maybe 2 weeks before we did with their non-response follow-up. But as you heard Diane say, here in Montgomery County, we were only able to get back to face-to-face community outreach for the census starting on August 7th. So what that allows us to do is realize that there's a correlation between the date that non-response follow-up began for the purpose of the Census Bureau and when we began our community outreach, at least from a face-to-face perspective. So when we look at these numbers, you'll see me discuss what the response rate was prior to non-response follow-up, and then what the response rate was during non-response follow-up. The only reason we're using that is because it gives us a look into what the results were of our outreach in these communities during the phase that we were able to get back out into communities. The last thing to keep in mind is between May, June, and July, effectively the response rates, the self-response rates across the country, but specifically here in Montgomery County, were relatively flat. So really we were seeing no uptick in response rates, and it was kind of frustrating for us. So when we talk about what effect we had in these communities when we began this outreach, you'll get to see an idea of why we were so proud of the work we did once we were able to get back and do some of the community outreach. So the first community I'm going to focus on to talk about is that census tract that we named Fairland, but it actually runs along Castle Boulevard. The reason this census tract is significant as far as we were concerned is because it actually sat at the top of our list of low response communities, or those communities, or that community that was anticipated to be among the least responsive in 2020 census. We're really excited and proud, really, to announce that not only were they not amongst our least responsive, but they actually exceeded the 2010 numbers. In 2010, the response rate, self-response rate, was 55.5%, and in 2020, they reached 60.3%, and that was a win for us. The one thing that to keep in mind, I'm sure everyone in council is familiar with Fairland, that census tract, the specific census tract that we're referencing, has a 99% of those households rent, right? And we talk about those things that we use as markers for historically undercounted populations or communities that we anticipate to have low response rates. Renters, immigrant communities, and our people of color tend to be at the top of what we can use to anticipate that. So really am proud of what we were able to accomplish in Fairland. We did door hanging in that community. We were able to hit food distribution events on Saturdays, almost just about every Saturday, as we were able to get back into the community. So we're really proud of that. Next census tract we want to discuss really quickly is Wheaton. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to meet 2010 self-response rates of 70.2, but we did hit 62.8. Now, again, we knew going into this whole campaign there were going to be communities that we were going to have difficulties getting them to reach our goal in terms of response rate. But the reason why we're highlighting this census tract is we spent just about every weekend at Wheaton Westville Mall with Identity and with CCACC and with our other community partners to get as many folks to respond to the census and potentially register to vote and make a plan for voting and talk about other resources as relates to COVID, but primarily promoting the census. And that work seems to have been relatively effective. We had a jump or a bump of 7.2 percentage points after we were able to get out in the community. So that's the reason we're highlighting this community. It was a census tract that we had focused on going into this, and that 7.2% bump gives us some really encouraging numbers in terms of how effective our work was. All right, so now next census tract that we wanted to talk about is Montgomery Village. We made the decision to target the H Mart just outside of that census tract, the Mega Mart that sits off at 355, and then we even hosted a food distribution event at the Cider Mill Apartments. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar with Cider Mill or familiar with the Montgomery Village community. You know how diverse it is and how much of that community is made up by our immigrant community. So again, unfortunately, we didn't quite reach that 64.8 percentage points in terms of response rates from 2010, but that 7.4% jump after we were able to get out and start our face-to-face community outreach is really encouraging, and it's amongst the highest jump we saw when we were able to go out and do this work. Now, I'm most happy about what we were able to accomplish in Long Branch. And again, we didn't reach the 2010 response rates mark of 70.8 percentage points. However, that being said, if you look at the jump or the bump that we got after we were able to go out and start this work, it was significant. The highest that we saw in any of the census tracts that we were involved in across the county, 8.0 percentage points from the time we started that weekend of August 7th through October 15th. Really excited about the work. We were at Crossroads Farmers Market every Wednesday. We were at New Hampshire State's Elementary School, the food distribution event there every Monday. We hosted events just outside of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. And we also, just down the street from the census tract, were fortunate enough to be allowed to participate at St. Camilla's Church in their food distribution event on Fridays and Saturdays. So really invested a lot of manpower, and our partnership with Identity was crucial to the work we did in this community. We're really excited about the gains we made once we were able to go out into that census tract. All right, so last but not least, actually it's not last, but last of our, the census tracts that we spent a lot of time thinking about was Aspen Hill. Now, again, we didn't quite meet our mark of 67.0 percentage points. That was the rate in 2010. But if you see, after we were able to go out and start this work, we actually saw a bump of 7.9 percentage points. And that was the second highest of all the census tracts that we focused all of our attention on. And we're really, really encouraged by the work we were able to do there. We spent a lot of time at Pepper Tree Farms apartments and food distribution events that were hosted there. Our actual very first event was at Plaza Del Mar Carter, for those who are familiar with that community. And then Identity actually was out at the Mega Mart on Georgia Avenue quite frequently to help us on the days that the volunteers weren't there. So we're excited about the work, really, really encouraged about what we were able to do there. I just wanted to highlight that community for you as well. Now, the reason we'll talk, to spend just 1 second talking about Leisure World, is that, as you know, Diane mentioned, this was the first time that the census was primarily promoted as an online response device or mechanism. And that caused quite a bit of tribulation for us in terms of planning for our seniors across Montgomery County. And so because we were concerned about how they would feel in terms of using technology, we spent quite some time hosting events in Leisure World and other senior communities across Montgomery County to make sure they knew what the options were, what they could anticipate in terms of responding to the 2020 census. And believe it or not, as the census opened up on March 15th, they actually led the response rates all the way through May in terms of being the most responsive census tract across Montgomery County. As it turns out, they slowed down just a little bit, and they didn't end up being the most responsive census tract in the county. But we're really excited about the work that we did there, and just Leisure World and that community's the way they've embraced the process. The one thing I want you to take notice of is if you look at that internet response rate, it's actually, if not the lowest, the second lowest in Montgomery County for how folks respond to the census. So even understanding that there was a barrier there for them in terms of how they responded, that community did respond at a really, really high level, and we were really, really excited about that. And just wanted to highlight that for you. Lastly, in terms of those census tracts that we discussed specifically. Now, really quickly, we partnered with hundreds of community organizations, nonprofits, jurisdictions, civic associations, in the work that we did across Montgomery County. But I want to take a time or a moment to highlight those nonprofit organizations that were at the core of the work that we did and actually received state funding from us to do the work. Specifically Identity and ESYDA for the work that they helped us do in East County specifically, in Silver Spring, Long Branch, Aspen Hill, and in Gaithersburg. Without all of these organizations, specifically those two, I'm not sure we could have accomplished what we did with our LEP communities across the county. So that's it in terms of giving you an update or just a more granular look at the work we did over the last 6 months specifically, but also just a 12-month approach to this strategic outreach.
Thank you, Sean. Can you now just very quickly give the next key dates to keep in mind?
Sure. So I wish I could say that the census work was done. It is not. They are still compiling data. And as many of you know, there is at least one significant question that is still left to be answered. So let's talk about 3 dates that everyone should be aware of. One is just passed. So the Supreme Court yesterday heard arguments as to whether the Trump administration could leave undocumented immigrants out of the count of the total population in the census. And of course, those of you who've been paying attention know that has everything to do with representation and apportionment. We hope to get a decision on that in upcoming weeks, but I hope you all notice that that was on the calendar for yesterday, and to keep your eye on the news as far as that is concerned. Secondly, December 31st is still the date that the Census Bureau is required to deliver the data for apportionment to the desk of the President of the United States. That has not changed. There was some discussion about pushing that back into April of 2021, but at this point, they are still scheduled to deliver that information to the President on December 31st. Last but not least, I'm sure it's really something that this group is interested in, is the data as it relates to redistricting is due to the states on April 1st. Now, what I'll say about this is there is some chance that that April 1st deadline will not be made. However, there's been no official announcement that there are plans to reschedule this date or to miss this date. So as it stands at this point, April 1st is still the date, I should say April 1st, 2021 is still the date that states should receive that data as far as redistricting is concerned.
All right, thank you, Sean. So lastly, I just want to thank the entire council for all of your support and assistance in encouraging all of our communities to be counted for the census. And particularly, I want to thank our CCC chair, council member Nancy Navarro, for all of your support. So you have my record, you have my report on record, and I'm here to answer any other questions. And I know I'm standing between you and the door.
Not the first. Thank you so much, Diane and Sean. This is a terrific report. As a district council member, I just want to, before I forget, thanks for your great work in Fairland. I spoke to a number of groups up there and told them that they had been selected as the tract that was predicted to have the lowest response rate, and told them they needed to be part of the solution, and you really have come through. So I really appreciate that. Long Branch as well. Let me turn it over to our Complete Count Committee Chair and thank her in advance for all her hard work on this. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you so much, Ms. Fu and Mr. Ellis. I have to completely admit that you guys are the ones to have all the credit. You need to take all the credit for this incredible strategy. I mean, when you think about, I think Montgomery County is like the poster child for a jurisdiction that had to overcome the most extraordinary challenges. I mean, from the very beginning, just by virtue of who we are, not just the geographic area, but our diversity, the fact that we know that we have undocumented residents, all of these, messages from the very top, from this, White House. I mean, all of those were barriers to overcome. And I'll be honest, from the very beginning, I kept wondering, like, how is that message going to be crafted? Because how do you really ensure folks that, hey, it's okay, it's all right, it's important, go ahead, when they're hearing all of these constant messages? So it's amazing that you guys, because you literally deployed a multi-level strategy of organizing and engagement that was so key. And so what I can say in terms of what this means for us is that it's solidifying, in so many ways codifying, the strategy that we have to use for everything else that we seek to do with our residents. You guys have literally updated that strategy that now we can deploy on so many other issues, including what we're facing right now with COVID-19. You have tested the strategy, and you need to be leading all of that. I mean, I will definitely be calling on you guys every single time I hear somebody say, well, how will we reach this? Oh, we haven't been able to spend the money because these are hard to reach communities, which I hope we never use that term again. They're not hard to reach, right? We know it's possible. We just have to pay some attention as well as be intentional. You guys were able to demonstrate this. So kudos to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because of course, above everything else, then you had the pandemic. So can you just imagine? I mean, every single barrier, but this is so critical, and it's so critical for our communities, for representation, for budget allocation on so many levels. And so ultimately, of course, I want to thank the community that responded, that, regardless of all of these barriers, they did respond and they understood how important this is. So anyway, I'm just so proud of everything that you guys were able to do. And we'll say again, you have literally codified the template of how we have to ensure that we deliver the kind of services and that type of outreach to truly engage our community forward. Thank you y gracias.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you. First, thank you, Nancy, for representing us as chair of the Complete Count Committee. And you're absolutely right. The efforts of this committee and this entire strategy were nothing short of remarkable. And having been around county government now on both sides of the aisle for the last 14 years, I'm going to put this in the top 10, honestly, that I've seen personally of incredible just output. And this has long-term ramifications on so many different levels. And I loved going to the Complete Count Committee meetings, just even virtually, because as you flip through the pages, you did such a magnificent job of making sure that urban, suburban, and rural were represented, affluent and not affluent. We had every minority represented times 10. We had every faith represented. We had young, we had old. It was so diverse in every way imaginable. It was such a microcosm of the county. And I think it speaks to the relationship building that has happened over generations, over previous administrations, the trust that we've been able to establish with community-based organizations, the capital that we've been able to establish with so many of the key community leaders and stakeholders, we were able to draw down from. And my God, we needed it, because the Trump administration, through their nefarious efforts, which continue today, as we've heard, tried to circumvent and cut the knees of jurisdictions around the country in a way that was just shocking. And one day we're going to process and look back on and just scratch our heads and can't believe the atrocities that have been committed over the last 4 years, this being at the front of the list. So to overcome that, plus a pandemic, plus, a looming recession with, divergent sectors impacted, and to increase our output from 10 years previously is insane. I mean, I really, at various points, like, I lost sleep over this. I was like, we're screwed. How are we going to overcome this? And it was because of the sheer effort and determination and will, and frankly, Diane, your leadership. You, sister, really exemplified all the comments we said about you when you were initially put up for appointment in this position. It came out in spades. Both your positive attitude, your organizational skills, your ability to connect and problem solve in real time, all came into play here. And so it really is a testament to you and your entire team. And Councilmember Navarro is absolutely right. We need to triple down on this approach and utilize it in every sector imaginable: business development, human services, education. I mean, there are so many implications for this. And I think that in a longer debrief later, as the dust settles, I think it's going to, be important for us to think about that and the implications of that. The final thing I'll say for now is, it goes without saying that reach restricting information is really important on a lot of different levels, even more so in this next cycle for a lot of complex reasons. And so anything that the council can do, there's a lot out of our control, clearly, but it goes without saying, anything we can do to continue to press through and the finish line here, don't hesitate, as you never would, to let us know, because we absolutely desperately need that information in order for us to be able to move forward a process that's going to be critical 2 years from now. So with that said, I just so appreciative of this, and it's such a nice day to end on a high note, especially in the midst of all these challenges. This was really amazing, Diane. And Sean, you did a great job, truly, the whole team. Thank you.
Yep. Well said. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make this short because all the accolades have been rightfully given. But first, thank you to the Complete Count Committee Chair, Ms. Navarro, and then to Ms. Vu and Mr. Ellis, or Mr. Census. I like that, Mr. Census. It's a good thing it rhymes too. I got to applaud you and your team and your volunteers and all the nonprofit organizations that you've been working with. The outreach that you described is absolutely incredible. From the jumps and the bumps, from the in-person outreach to the overall increase in turnout, in responses over the last 10 years from the last census. I mean, congratulations and well done. And as you rightly noted, this is so important for representation and appropriation. And for every person not counted, it costs the county $18,000 approximately over the 10-year period. And the two things I just want to close with is the outreach that you did and described. I don't know why we can't do that across so many other agencies and departments here in the county. All of us here at the council have been talking about making sure that people who need COVID relief have the information, right? And the language, the appropriate language that is needed. And here you are texting and using WhatsApp and all of these different platforms to communicate with people. And we're just trying to get information to people about rental assistance and food insecurity. So whoever's listening, let's replicate this. Let's instill these types of programs and get people up to speed on some of this software so that we can continue communicating with communities that need to be communicated with aggressively and proactively, as you have done. So I want to learn from you, and I want other agencies and departments to learn from you as well. So let's continue that conversation. And then with regard to the counting itself, this conversation is very timely because this council, after a few Z's overnight, we're going to turn around tomorrow and start talking to people who want to serve on the redistricting commission. And I'm excited to see the hard work that you've put in, how that manifests itself in greater representation here in Montgomery County and where those population centers are, and making sure that all of the new members of our community over the last 10 years, or those who might be here, might have been here before, but just were never counted, will literally be represented in 2022 after we do the redistricting. So your hard work does go on for a long time, and I want to thank and applaud you for all of it.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
So I'm going to add to the accolades that are already there, but let me just say, Director Vu, it starts with you. And I didn't mean for that to rhyme, I swear. I didn't. But the reality is this, is look, if anybody's ever seen a dossier that Director Vu has made for any of our trips abroad, I will tell you that there was no question that she was going to do a great job with this. And so when it came to her leading this effort, I said we were good. And sure enough, that was exactly the case. One of the things that I want to highlight is something that goes beyond the census itself. And folks have kind of touched on this, but even the thematic that you chose in terms of everyone counts meant so much more than just about counting via the census. Because what you did is you reached out to communities and told them that they mattered, that they were instrumental in terms of us in county government, and we needed to have them be a part of. And just as you heard from other folks, you guys reached into pockets where others have not been successful at doing so. And so it was not just about counting them, but it was about also making sure that they understood that their government felt that they mattered to them. And that's a big deal. That really is something that's going to have lasting ramifications, I think, in terms of making our community even better, in terms of folks understanding, primarily people of color, people of lower socioeconomic status, who don't normally participate in these things, about how they play a role in government and how government values them. And oh, by the way, as people have said, you did it at a time in which you had a global crisis going on in terms of the global pandemic and racial unrest in which people weren't happy with government, right? It wasn't just about police. It was all about just the whole establishment type thing and the anti-view there. You did it in the midst of that and still increased. I mean, if you were explaining to us today that, look, we tried, and with all the things that were happening, we didn't really meet the mark, we would still be singing your praises and saying, kudos for a job well done. But guess what? You crushed it. You still went above. And that says something. That says something about the dedication. And it starts from leadership and goes all the way down. So to you, Mr. Ellis, and to the entire team, just thank you. Thank you for making Montgomery County a better place based on the work that you've done. It's tremendous. So kudos. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Friedson.
Well, I will bite. Everything that could be said has already been said, as former Council President Katz likes to say, but it hasn't been said by me, so I'll say a little bit of it too. First of all, the census is so important. It's not just about representation, it's about resources and the amount of tens of millions of dollars in resources that our county is going to get in order to address the issues that our residents face. That's what this is about. It's not just making sure that we count everybody, which is important, making sure that everybody counts, which is important, making sure that we have the full breadth of who is in our community and that we value everybody equally, which has not always been the case. But it is real dollars, life-saving, life-changing dollars that we're going to need to be able to deploy to help people. And if ever there was a time when that was clear, it's now, with so many needs in our community, particularly those who you did have to work so hard to be so creative in order to reach. And so I just can't overstate, we all can't overstate how important this work is that you have done, how challenging it was, how much you stepped up to this. I would say that the next person to oversee this effort will have big shoes to fill. I'm not sure how big your shoes are, but I know that you have the coolest shoes around. If anybody has seen Diane Vu's sneaker collection, it is about the coolest sneaker collection of anybody I know. So you have big and cool shoes to fill. And Mr. Ellis, thank you as well for all your efforts. But as everybody else has said, we have struggled in so many other ways to reach people in this pandemic. I mean, we've been told we can't get enough people to reply and respond with money we know they need, with resources we know they need, and you all have figured out a way to do it. So I'm hoping we can bottle up your energy, your lessons learned, your skills and talent that you all have developed and redeploy them now that you have a little bit less on the census side, and we can use you for so many other aspects of county government that we so desperately need at this time. And so I just wanted to applaud you, thank you, recognize you. It's really a testament to your leadership, your hard work, your dedication to our county and our community. And thank you as well to Councilmember Navarro for representing us and helping to lead and guide this effort as well. But at a time when it has been really tough to do a lot of things, this might have been one of the toughest things to do. And you all stepped up in such a significant way. And it really is a testament to Montgomery County, to who and what we are, who and what we value, and the benefits from the work that you have done will benefit our community and our county for a decade and beyond. And I hope you take significant amount of pride in that. We certainly take pride in you. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. I'm going to quote me as well, Andrew. Everything that has been, no. Census is much more. Census certainly is about counting people, but it's reminding people how much they count and how we count on them. And that's the big part of a census. And what you all did was remarkable because you did it the right way. And, there was a time that if somebody did something the right way, you hardly had to mention it because people did things the right way. A lot of places, they don't do it the right way. You did. You went out. You made certain that people realized how important they are, which goes way beyond census. And you reminded them that they're not only are they helping themselves, they're helping their community. And that is the most significant thing that we can all agree with. So, I'm not going to belabor the point. I just want to say congratulations. I personally want to thank Councilmember Navarro as well. When this whole thing started, we all realized that we were going to do something right. We just didn't know how right we were going to do it. We didn't realize all the barriers that were going to be in the way. But you and your team and everybody associated with you did just an unbelievably good job. So thank you for doing all of that. Thanks.
Well said. Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. I'll be the caboose here. I just want to say one of the things I love about the work that Diane and the team does is that it's just community organizing. And, our local government needs to have a home for that kind of creativity and that on the ground work to get out and get the message out and get results. And one of the things about community organizing is it works best when it's run by metrics and there are quantifiable results that the organizers know that they have to achieve. And your team, Diane, you've done a terrific job holding yourselves accountable to the goal, and you've delivered the results. So, the outcome speaks for itself, but something that we need to grow. We need to do more of this kind of work in more areas. COVID is a great example where this kind of community engagement will have an outsized impact, but there'll be more in the future. So thanks to the team. Appreciate everyone's work on this.
Okay, Council Vice President Albornoz.
Last comment, I failed to acknowledge our regional service centers played a really huge role here too. I want to acknowledge all 5 of them. I know I was out there one Saturday with Riberto. It was pretty cold, rainy day, and we were out just passing out signs and knocking doors, and so and I think to your point, Councilmember Reamer, we've talked, this council and previous councils have talked about this too. I think our regional service center director, that's a place we got to go back to because a lot of that community organizing used to happen within those RSCs. And so it's something that we need to contemplate moving forward. But anyways, I digress. Thank you so much for everything.
Okay, I think everything's been said, but you have our gratitude, and we are looking forward to continuing to engaging using all your techniques in lots of other areas, as everyone said. So thank you so much. We're very grateful for all the hard work you did. I hope you get some rest, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.